we'll be recording this call, and recording has started. So yes, my name is Samuel Obode. I am many things, but currently I am a product owner, as well as I started my career out as a software engineer and a quality assurance engineer as well. In the early days, actually software quality assurance before I moved into software development full time, and on there to process optimization and solutions architecture before now product design. So yeah, today I'll be taking you guys on Agile in testing. But before we go into Agile in testing, I would like to take you guys on Agile in and of itself. So give me a second. I'm sharing my screen. Please let me know when you see my screen show up on your end. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Yes, I can.
All right. Can everyone see it now?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. If we can all see the training agenda. All right, great. So yeah, I'm going to be really fast. So that I don't take so much of your time. Unfortunately, a lot of people joined late. So we started, 8:15. So I'll try and compress into 20 minutes. So yeah, our training agenda, we'll go through what Agile is. We'll go through the Agile manifesto. We'll go through different types of broken down Agile framework, Scrum, KANBAN, who a Scrum Master is, the role of testers, in an Agile process and Agile process. So yeah, what is Agile basically? And in order for us to go through what Agile is, I'll just bring to the screen a definition. I'm going to try and explain some other forms of project management. So before we go into the actual answering that question, what is Agile, I would like to give you a context. I like to give context so that it help you understand, but I'm going to try to be fast so that I don't take so much of your time. So in project management, right, in building a solution, you need to, in doing anything, you need project management. In building a house, you need to project manage. In building a software, you need to plan and go through several stages while building a solution, right? And so that's what we call project management. Now, there are different methodologies to actually, in project management, to actually delivering a software. I'm giving this context so that you know exactly why Agile was born. Now, there are several different methodologies in project management. There's the waterfall, there's the spiral. These are ways to actually build, processes you follow in delivering a project. So let me give you an example. I like to use a lot of examples in this session. So an example is building a house. The methodology used in building a house is usually waterfall. Now, waterfall, just like the name implies, it's water. Just assume water falling down from a staircase, right? So if water is flowing down from a staircase, it gets to the first stair on the topmost staircase before it comes to the next, before it gets to the bottom. So in waterfall, what it really just means is that it follows a linear process from top to bottom. So there are several stages in waterfall project development. You gather your requirements from, so let's use an example again. So let's say Dangote wants to build a massive application to manage all his businesses, right? A project or a business analyst, project manager or a business analyst goes to Dangote and say, okay, give me all your requirements, high level. What do you want to do? Okay, I want, a software that can manage the trucks, manage this, that. So all of that is requirements gathering. So we tag that requirements gathering, right? The next phase in waterfall is, you go through requirements. After requirements gathering, you go to your requirements definition, analysis and definition. Then you go into your functional requirement and system specification documentation. You document all of that. Now, all of these things, sometimes requirement gathering will take like a month. Then your documentation period will take like maybe 2 months. Then, before developers, get to start developing, developers can take maybe 1 year, and they're developing everything you wrote out as a scope in your requirements phase. So sometimes they may go on writing the code for a year or maybe 18 months. And after they finish writing the code, then they'll call testers into the room and say, come and test what we have built. The testers test and will say, oh, you made a mistake. So we've done 1 month requirement gathering, 2 months, what's it called? 2 months designing and, documenting. Then we spent 18 months building. That's 18 plus 3 months. That's about 21 months. Then testers will spend maybe 1 month testing. That's 22 months. Then when testers are done and bring out their report, testers will say, oh, but you missed, or this thing doesn't actually do anything for the user. This is, and that thing that testers brought out was something that the developer developed in the 3rd month, in the 18th month. And that thing is more or less like sort of core to the whole application. And so for developers to go and fix it, they have to decouple and break down what they have built in 18 months. Maybe it takes them another 6 months to fix all the issues that developers have brought. So at the end of the day, you see that by the time your product is ready for the market, because of our ever-changing world, once the product is ready for the market has moved past the product. So at the end of the day, waterfall methodology in software development, 65% of software development projects were always a failure, because at the end of the day, the market didn't need it anymore. Now, that's why Agile, the word Agile, came into play. Now, the Agile methodology is a way to manage a project by breaking it up into several phases. It also involves, now I'm reading from the screen so you can see what's on your screen. So it involves constant collaboration with your stakeholders. Then you have to continuously improve at every stage. So once the work begins, the team cycle through the process of planning, executing, and evaluating. Now, this is very key. So unlike Agile, that when you evaluate at the end of the entire project, so after 22 months, you now come and start evaluating to see what do we do wrong, what do we do right, what are our learnings. In Agile, you constantly evaluate, and you constantly plan, and you constantly execute at the same time. So you are not doing it in a linear process, it's happening all at the same time. Now, in waterfall, you got bad products out, you did it in a longer time, and you had people, tired of the product, developers tired of the product at the end of 22 months. But in Agile, you are delivering things as fast as 6 weeks, or sometimes 4 weeks, or maybe even 2 weeks. You are delivering outputs, at that fast. You are also, after every sprint session, after every sprint, and I'll explain what the sprint is. A sprint is a phase, an iteration. So when we say we break it down into phases, into stages. So let's say a milestone, right? So instead of waiting 18 months to see what the developers are building, we'll say, okay, yes, we said we should build this solution for Dangote, but first and foremost, even build the login and registration pages for us in the first 2 weeks. When you finish building it, we'll come and test, we'll evaluate, we'll plan for the next one again, or plan and say, okay, we need to remove this. After every, let's say, for example, build it in 1 month and, let's test it. So it's Agile, like the word, is very agile. You do things simultaneously at the same time. Now, I'll still bring it back home to you guys to actually show you how testers, this affects the world of testing, right? So let's just go on in the presentation. Now, the Agile has a manifesto, or less like principles that you must follow. Number 1 is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Unlike waterfall, in waterfall, what happens is when I go to Dangote and Dangote give me and say this is all he needs to do, I'll start negotiating with him to say, okay, this is your scope, and the scope can never change, right? But in Agile, after every 2 weeks, and I go and demo to Dangote, Dangote will say, this thing I told you to do before, I didn't think it well. Now that I'm seeing this one like this, change this one, change this one. So I'm collaborating with him and changing those things fast. Unlike waterfall, I'll tell Dangote, no, Dangote, you cannot change this thing. No. This was what we decided that you said you wanted, and we built it. You can't change it. You are going to change it. We have to give you a new timeline. we'll now have to now start giving you new bill to build this thing. So that's what it means by customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Number two is individual interaction over processes and tools. Now, in waterfall follows strict processes in terms of, you build this documentation, you use the project management tools and all of that. Now, don't get it wrong. In Agile, it doesn't mean that you are not going to use these tools. In Agile, it doesn't mean that you're not going to do contract negotiations. What it means that you should focus more on customer collaboration and focus more on individual interaction rather than focusing on processes and tools like waterfall does, right? So individual interaction, meaning I'm interacting constantly with the devs. If I'm as a product person, as a tester, you're interacting constantly with the dev and interacting constantly with the product owner to know, if you don't understand something, if you want to get something done, or there is a blocker, that constant interaction with everybody on the team is there. That is one of the great things that Agile brings to bear. Now, responding to change. Remember what I said in number one, while I tell Dangote, oh, you cannot change this. Now, Agile allows you to respond to change really, really fast. There was a time that I was given to join do a project. We planned to do that project in 8 months, and this was a company that had never really done any project, delivered any project in the right timeline. After 2 months, we realized that we started wrong. We had to start the project from scratch all over again, and we didn't extend our 8 months, but we met it. So we're able to respond quickly to change. Unlike, people, in normal day, people will say, no, after we started this thing, you now want to change this thing again. No, once you are being agile, you have to condition your mind that things can change any day, anytime, over following a plan. It doesn't mean that you don't plan. So remember, Agile says constant planning. So at the beginning of every sprint, you must plan, but you should be able to respond to change. Now, it also focuses on a working software over full documentation. So in Agile, we're not looking for you to document 200 pages. There are so many softwares in Waterfall. You have like 200 or 250 pages of documentation of what the software does. But at the end of the day, software doesn't really do everything in the page because they spend more of their time writing that document than actually coding the software. So a working software over full documentation. So this is the Agile Manifesto. You can go online. Now, in this course, this is a very, very short crash course. Agile goes way deeper. So I'll advise you guys as I'm talking, if you have questions, jump in. If you want to take notes as to go and Google. Those of you I met at the office on the first Saturday, if you remember, I said Google is your friend. Always Google. You can go Google what Agile Manifesto is. You get a lot of articles, you get a lot of detailed definition of the Agile Manifesto, right? Now, moving on, in Agile, there are two frameworks, sort of, Scrum and KANBAN. I'm going to explain what both of them, how they work, basically. So, Scrum is a process where, like you can see on the screen, this is Scrum. It is a process where a product owner creates all his product backlog to say, okay, these are all the things I want to achieve for this product. These are my features, for example, on this product, right? So he puts it in a product backlog. And okay, sorry, before I go into Scrum, I would like to explain something else before I go into it. Now, in Agile, there's what we call the Agile ceremonies. They are processes that we follow in Agile. And these processes are numerous, and I'll explain what they are. Firstly, there's what we call a sprint planning. There's what we call stand-ups. There's what we call sprint review. There's what we call the sprint demonstration and a sprint retrospective. Now, don't bother cramming these things I'm saying. If you feel that this is too much for you right now, don't even bother so much, because you will start hearing it over and over again to start sinking. You're not supposed to. It's not going to sink in just immediately, right? So let me start with what a sprint planning is. A sprint planning session, like we said, we are breaking down. So let me give you an example so that you understand better. So let's say we want to build a banking application that has the following features: the feature to transfer money to customers within the same bank, Another feature is to transfer money to customers within to different banks. Another feature is to buy or sell foreign exchange, or to say you have dollars. Another feature is to create different accounts: dollar accounts, pounds account, naira account. And that feature is to, I've mentioned 4 features now. And that feature is to say, you are checking your transaction history, right? 5 features. Now, once I give a product owner is going to take these 5 features and write out what we call user stories. Don't bother yourself about that. That's product stuff for now. You get to understand it later on. Now, when he writes these user stories, he creates, what we call his product backlog. So this is everything he wants to achieve for this product, all the features, put it into his product backlog. But he will now come and say, okay, because we said we are going to break down this entire, all these things I want to achieve into phases, into milestones. What is my first milestone? He can now say, okay, I want to first achieve creation of accounts as his first milestone. That's creation of different accounts, whether pounds accounts. So you can now say that, okay, this creation of account, before people can create, different accounts, they need to even first register with us. So he'll now say, okay, for my first milestone, I will do the registration flow and the account creation flow. So that will be every phase, we call it a sprint in Agile. So when you hear me using the word sprint, it's the same thing as a milestone, the same thing as a phase, for example. So I can decide to do a sprint. Decide to do those 2 things in my first sprint. Then I will now say, okay, for transfer within GT Bank and transfer outside of GT Bank, I want to merge those 2 features into another sprint. So let's say sprint 2. So these are what we call sprints. Now in Agile, your sprint is determined by the team and how good the team is. If it's a new team who don't really know each other, it's advised that your sprint should stay a longer period. So your sprint duration can be 1 week, it can be 2 weeks, it can be 4 weeks. But in Agile, best practices says maximum of 4 weeks, minimum of 1 week. Now the team will decide what works best for them based on how good they are in terms of skill set, in terms of, sometimes you may have people who have a lot of, everybody on the team is highly skilled, but they don't know each other, they're in different countries, So at the end of the day, the team decides how long a sprint should be. So now that the sprint is out of the way, now the sprint backlog is like a list of all the activities broken down of what you are going to do in that sprint. So you have your sprint goal. So like I mentioned, those 2 things I mentioned now are the sprint goal for sprint 1. I want to be able to register people and let them be able to create different bank accounts after registering. That is my sprint goal, to achieve these 2 things. Now, in order to achieve these 2 things, there may be 50 different activities that will take place. All of those activities will be documented in a sprint backlog. Now, the sprint begins for that cycle. So that cycle is for example, I can decide my cycle is a 1-month cycle. So my sprint duration is 1 month. So that sprint duration starts. I start designing the user interface, designing the designing the APIs, the database, all of that stuff. Now, while doing that, testers will start testing during that cycle. So that's why here you see you analyze. So when the product owner brings the sprint backlog, everybody joins in a session, in the sprint planning session. So the sprint planning happens. Everybody analyzes all that needs to be done. We'll document all the different tasks. Even if there is a task to say someone should research on something, you will take it down. If there's a task to say someone should go to the Ikeja to do something, you take it down. So by the time you do all of that, you start, the build and designing of all of these things. Testers will also start testing immediately. After all of that, on the last day of the sprint, so we said our sprint is 1 month, right? On the last day of that 1 month duration, that cycle, we will come together and do a sprint review. So we will review and say, okay, this was what we said. This was our sprint goal. This is what we set out to do at the beginning of the sprint, right? Now let's check what we were able to achieve. Did we achieve it? Did we achieve more or did we achieve less? Now that's what your sprint review is all about. Sometimes you also now need to do a sprint demonstration. So if Dangote is the person we are building this product for example, we have to demonstrate to him and say, see, we have built the registration. This is how it looks like. then the person will give his own input. You take that in, the product owner will take back those feedback into his product backlog. If he needs to make any changes to some things, he make changes, and he creates your sprint, the new sprint backlog for the next sprint, and the cycle starts all over again. So you see that we are constantly planning, we are constantly executing, we are constantly testing, right? Now another ceremony that happens in the sprint is that every day of that cycle, so if that 1 month, every day once the sprint starts, we will do what we call a stand-up session. Stand-up sessions are meant so that every member of that project team will say, this is what we did yesterday. This is what I did. Sorry, no, this is what I did yesterday. This is what I'm going to do today. This is the challenge I ran into yesterday, or I don't have any challenge. Or yesterday I couldn't do anything because I had a blocker. Somebody hasn't given me blah blah. So every day, now the essence of this is not to be tracking anybody's life. The essence of this is so that there's who we call a Scrum Master and the product owner will quickly know. I'll explain who a Scrum Master is really later on. We'll quickly know what to do, if to make any changes, if to escalate to the owner of the product, the sponsor of the product, if to bring somebody on board temporarily or permanently. Make a quick decision. Basically, that's what that these stand-ups are for. So, and also everybody will know what everybody is doing and if everybody is having. And that each thing that I've seen happen in stand-ups is, I've given stand-ups before, and somebody who I felt was so junior to me, said, "Oh, I came across an article like this. Take a look at it, and it solved my problem." There's another time someone said, "Oh, I think you should try this out." Something I never really thought about, but because I dropped my stand-up explaining my challenge, I was able to solve it. So these are the ceremonies that happen at the end of the day. All of these help you to working products, working software over full documentation. So you see, what we are doing here is going through this process, this agile process, and at the end of the day, we are not focusing on documentation. All the sprint backlog we are doing is still documentation, but now it's not all those long 3,000 pages documentation that people do on a normal day. Then after your sprint review, like I said, you may decide to do a sprint demonstration to the product sponsors. That's assuming that's necessary. So it depends on the theme, but usually I like that to happen separately from your sprint review. Some people merge it with the sprint review, some people leave it separately. Now, lastly, there's what we call a sprint retrospective. Now, what a sprint retrospective really does is similar to the review, but here, what you do is you are saying, okay, fine, we've done the review, we've done demo. For example, we didn't meet our target, or let's even say we met our sprint goal. So, but during that sprint, there are so many things that happened. So we will now start asking, what did we do right, so that we can continue doing it. Now, it's not just only to find what we did wrong or somebody did something wrong. It's to find if somebody did something right, so that, oh, this person did something right, all of us need to start doing this thing because this is a good thing to do. So by the time we identify, that's what the sprint retro is for. You identify everything we did right, you identify everything you did wrong. So the ones you did right, you continue doing it. You're hammering on everybody, oh, let's continue doing this thing. So it's at the back of everybody's mind, we need to continue doing this thing. The one we did wrong, we need to now find out, how do we solve that? How do we change that in the next sprint, right? So these are the main things in your sprint retrospective. Then you're also checking, if you're, although in your review you've checked if you met, your goal or not. So these are all the ceremonies of Agile, and this is what makes it, work. Now let me come into Scrum and KANBAN. Scrum and KANBAN are two separate sort of broken out Agile processes. Now, this flow I just explained is a typical Scrum project, the way I mentioned, the banking app, right? Now, that's what Scrum usually is used for. For KANBAN still has you still have some of all the ceremonies you have here, but you do not. So let me go. This is a KANBAN system. Forgive the typo on the top showing Scrum. This is KANBAN. In the KANBAN flow, what happens is you have your sort of backlog. You bring it into your sprints, and you analyze, you design, you develop, you test. It's not in any linear way anyways, but at the end of the day you deploy really fast. Most of all the ceremonies in Scrum system are also in Kanban. The difference which I want you to know, which will be differentiated for you, is let's assume that we have decided that the remember all the features I mentioned in this flow here that the product owner have put in the product backlog. Let's assume that that's not all the bank wants to deploy, but that's our MVP. Sorry, I did not explain what an MVP is. Now, an MVP is called the minimum viable product. So I mentioned 5 different features here. Let's assume the bank wants to deploy 50 different features. But we've told the bank that, hey, if you want to do the 50 different features, it will take 2 years. So why don't we take these 5, which are most important to your customers right now, and do it for you in 3 months? Those 5 that we've taken to do in 3 months is what we call MVP. It's the minimum viable product, the minimum product that is viable to the customer, that is useful to the customer. Those minimum, so we've taken those 5. It can be 10, it can be 5, it can be 2, it can be whatever, but it depends on your negotiation and what is most important to the customer at the end of the year, the product sponsor. So that minimum viable product, let's assume that we broke down that minimum viable product into 3 different sprints of 1 month, right? And we've delivered all the features in this. Now that 3 months, what we are running is a Scrum process, is a Scrum Agile framework, right? Now, the moment we deliver these 5 features, does that mean that we'll stop building the remaining 45? Of course not. We'll now after that 5, we'll now create a new phase. Instead of remaining 45, maybe we can pick 8 and say that 8 is phase 2, right? The product manager will now take that 8 into the product backlog and start breaking down. The whole cycle starts again. Using the that we've deployed and they're already using, issues will come up, feedback will come up, right? Now, we prefer to use a Kanban process because in that process, you are not going to be waiting for 1 month to deploy a bug fix. So, with something, you don't want to say before I deploy. So immediately as you are building, as you are analyzing, you are designing, you are developing, you are testing at the same time. A tester is doing all the tests, you are deploying immediately. So that Kanban process, you still do your daily stand-ups, you still do some, agile ceremonies, but you are not waiting, for those iterations before you deploy. So the difference is that you are deploying immediately to production, because it's more or less like you're fixing things, you're doing new releases and things like that. So on this screen, I just have Agile Scrum versus Kanban, and here you see Kanban. Kanban is all about visualizing your work, limiting work in progress. You are maximizing your efficiency. Do not, again, like I said, do not worry too much. You can Google these things if you don't understand totally, but at least now there's something called Scrum, there's something called Kanban, and they are using the Agile framework. And Agile framework is the modern framework that all the software development companies use today. Not just software development companies, every industry can use Agile, not just software development. You can use Agile in people use it in construction, people now use it in medical field, people use it to plan weddings. So it's just doing things simultaneously at the same time, managing your workflow. So here on the screen you can see different things, Kanban and Scrum. Scrum teams commit to ship working software through set of intervals called sprints. You understand? Whereas in Kanban, you are shipping it continuously, immediately, right? So you can go through. I think we'll get this document to you guys later. You can start to go through it. I'm not going to spend so much time. I want to focus more on how it affects you. I'm going to touch a little bit on Scrum Master. These are the roles and duties of the Scrum Master. Majorly in a summary, Scrum Master's job is to ensure that everybody on the team is living Agile. His job is to clear all the obstacles anybody has. So if somebody says, "Oh, my girlfriend dumped me yesterday, so it's not working fine," it's his job to take the person out to go drink a beer, to forget about the girlfriend, so that he can come back and write the code he needs to write. Or the tester says, "Oh, I don't have I can't install Catalan on my system. It's his job to go and check on how you help that person install Catalan on the system. So the Scrum Master's job is to remove any obstacle on the team. Scrum Master is someone who should be a team player, someone who is effective in communicating with people and all of those things. So I'm not going to go too much deeply on this. You can again Google the role of the Scrum Master in an Agile team. Now I'm going to focus on the role of testers. Now we know that testing, we in all Agile teams, we always say testing is a collective responsibility, not just the testers, but the testers are accountable at the end of the day, even though it's a collective responsibility of both the product owner, the project manager, business analyst, the software developer. Everybody's job, is to ensure that the software you have quality software. But at the end of the day, if it's not quality, who is going to be held accountable? Is the software tester on the project. So we say in Agile, everyone needs to have a testing mindset, but more so testers than other people, right? So I can sum this up into these 12 principles. You are looking for quality assistance, right? You're looking for continuous testing during the Agile development phase. Remember, we said that you're not going to wait for 18 months to test, or you're not going to wait for after even the 2 weeks to test. Immediately, a developer releases one API, the second API is still pending. Testers will already start testing. You're not going to wait for everything to be done before it tests. The only time you wait is maybe you want that first API to be done. After that one is done, it's not like if he has 10 APIs to do, you're waiting for the 10 to be done before you start testing. No. As he's shipping the first one, you are testing it. As the front-end guy is shipping the front-end code, you are testing it immediately. If his homepage you have done, start testing homepage. You understand? So you are continuously testing, over testing at the end. You are, like I said, quality assistance over quality assurance. You are taking, so the team takes responsibility for quality over testers' responsibility. Like I mentioned, so these are things that sometimes testers actually just think is only for them to just, when the thing comes, just test. No, one of the things that nobody really tell you that you'll find when you start this, when you go and get on this journey, is that you are doing a lot of people management in terms of especially software development, because you have to interact. You're doing a lot of interactions. So you need to learn how to communicate and collaborate. And during that communication and collaboration, you are also subtly passing the message to the developers and everybody in the team across to say, guys, before it even gets to me, you're also responsible for quality. It's not just me, but you are taking the overall accountability. So these things are very, very important. You must learn to communicate. These are soft skills that are taken for granted. And sometimes you start seeing fights here and there, and the end of the quality, is compromised because the tester feels, it doesn't go to meet this person, and he just feels, well, I'll test on my own. But at the same time, you probably don't even understand what you're testing. So sometimes you need to go sit to the dev, harass their ego and say, okay, explain to me what you are doing, what you have done, because it's, failing, or go say, who meet the product owner and things like that. But again, you are accountable for the quality, but the team is responsible for quality. Now you're also thinking about the whole team approach over testing department. So as a tester, you're not going to be saying, oh, you're only speaking to your fellow testers and your fellow, doing things with them. You are in a team, you understand? So it shouldn't be a department approach or independent testing. So even while testing, maybe you are 2 testers or 3 testers on a project, you're supposed to collaborate, know what the next person is doing, help, especially during stand-ups, you hear the person say, well, I have this issue. You can, do code reviews, or maybe in this case, not code review, if you're not doing automation testing. If it's manual testing, you can help the person out, look at what is giving the person a challenge, a colleague, or even if so, a developer, Now, we also encourage automated checking over manual regressions, right? So we also say testing technical and API testing over just GUI. So that's not saying don't do GUI testing, but you also need to test, APIs and things like that. So I want to focus on 2 main things. you see the part I highlighted in red. It says user stories and customer needs over requirement specification. So you also should look into the user stories, and because as a tester, there is at the back of your mind, and I'm sure you've heard this from previous people who have taken you guys, your number one goal is to help the user get quality, right? So you see that customer needs there is extremely important. So while you are testing, and the principle for writing a user story that the product manager uses is a user story usually starts with the word as a user, blah 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 blah. So when you are testing, you are testing as a user, right? So you are not saying, oh, this requirement specification, this is what I'm testing. Yes, you are going to be testing against some requirement specification, but if that requirement specification contradicts an experience that you feel the user should get, is left for you, because you are looking for quality, it's left for you to tell the product manager, I think this requirement needs to be changed to XXX because as a user, I think I prefer this to this, right? So you're not saying, oh, it's requirement specification I'm sticking to, but you're also going to be bringing that user to the forefront to say, okay, as a user, how would I like this thing, or is this how it should be? If so that empathy while you are testing. Now, you're building, so you are preventing defects over finding defects. I've worked with people when I started my career as a software tester. Back then, I'm guilty of it as well. When we say, oh wow, yes, I found this defect. We're already very happy when we find defects, but that's not. I quickly learned that that's not the essence of testing in an agile team. You are supposed to be preventing the defects. So when I test and I don't find defects, I should be more happy than when I find defects because the developers have done the right thing. And I've also, you understand? So, but I mean, finding defects are also very good because you are improving the quality. But your number one goal at the back of your mind while testing as the sprint is going on is to prevent defects, right? So like I said, at the end of the day, it is the tester's accountability for quality, whereas everybody is responsible for quality. So, but the main thing is, as you are working in this agile team, you have to participate in all the agile ceremonies. You have to, understand the flow, join the sprint planning sessions, because most times testers just feel, oh, what we just wait for is what we need to test. But you are going to participate in sprint planning sessions. So while that sprint is being planned, while they are planning on how they'll design the UI, you are also testing. Even as they are talking, you are in your mind, you are already applying those, test cases and saying, okay, as a user, do this thing make sense? So you are dropping. So in agile, we also include the quality assurance or the test personnel or the tester in the planning phase. In fact, in every phase. So that's how agile affects. So agile is not just for developers or product owners, is equally for testers, and you need to know the entire process of agile. So that's it from me for today. No one stopped me to ask questions, so I would like to give 5 minutes if you have questions. I hope I wasn't too fast. Like I said, this is a really high level crash course. There are so many things that still happen during. I omitted so many things because some of those things are done more by the developers than testers. So I wanted to focus more on how it affects you. So you can go Google several things. I think I'll give you some things to Google. So go Google what story point estimation is, and use this. Go on Google. Okay, no, maybe you shouldn't do that. Well, yeah, you should. If you're going to go into automated testing, go Google CI/CD pipelines. For those of you who will be interested in doing automation testing, so what is CI/CD pipeline, and how your test codes are integrated with the CI/CD pipeline. So the floor is open for questions, guys. Sorry that I had to rush through this. I didn't want to keep you guys up so late after a long day.
Yeah. Thank you very much, boss.
You're welcome.
Yeah. This is Mubarak. Yeah. So everyone, please let's take a few questions. And as I've always said, the WhatsApp group is available for us to always ask questions in case we have any. And at the same time, okay. Peter, can you unmute your mic and ask your question?
Yeah, so I just want to ask, how can you prevent bug as a tester, considering that you're the one testing the app?
Um, do you want to take that, boss? I should answer that.
I'm not sure I totally got the question.
Okay, so his question is asking if there's let me say more like give situations where as a tester you can seem to prevent bug from eventually occurring in an application.
Okay, so I mean, there can be several diverse ways, and I'm sure as you go in your career, you will get to see some of these things. So sometimes, while you are, sometimes there are bugs that are more process based than maybe not exactly bugs, so to say. So defects that are more process based, you're trying to prevent those defects, right? So from going to production. So while the team, or while you are doing your sprint planning, or even during the sprint, after the sprint planning sessions, you may come across several processes that will probably lead to a defect or a bug or an unacceptable something in the future. It's left for you to raise that either as a you can decide to raise it as a bug or raise it as a process change with the product owner and the rest of the team, right? So there are different ways. Now, one of the also another thing is what's preventing defects over finding defects is talking to more. It's more around your mindset as well, right? That's why I said it is testing, the agile testing mindset. If your goal is to find defects, you will be waiting. Even if you see a developer that is doing something and you know that that thing may lead to him writing rubbish code, you will wait for him because you are waiting to find defects, right? It's just, let me give you an example. Last man are not, they are not begging you to, they don't want you to, they're not trying to tell you the right thing. Okay, one way. Last man people will be the ones to go and remove the signboard that says one way, because why? They want you to take the one way so they will catch you. That's an example of a tester waiting to find defects, right? Your job is to find defects. Even after you put the signboard there and person still takes the one way, it's still your job to catch that person, right? But before the person enters, if the person has not entered, you can quickly wave the person and say, no, it's one way, go take another way. Then you see the person entry, maybe he doesn't know, you let him enter, then you now go and stop him in front, right? So it's more around your mindset rather than the actuality. But in reality, I can't really give you several scenarios, but they will occur, and you at that point in time you will realize that you're like, oh yeah, this is what we're talking about when we said preventing defects over finding defects, right? I've had and this are where there's a lot of friction. So I think everybody, Mubarak, can even tell you probably have had heated conversations or arguments or fights with developers and maybe product owners in the past. Why? Because sometimes developers have this feeling like, oh, you don't even know what they go through to do all this thing. You just come and do and come and say what he did is not good. You're just catching or finding, because you are deriving joy from finding defects. I'll give you my own experience. I've been in a company whereby teams ask and say, oh, we prefer Sam to be on our team rather than any other tester. Why? Because most of the time, what I do is I try to sit down and understand, okay, what are you trying to do? Sometimes I may have already found a defect, but I go back to meet them and say, hey, you must have done something in this code to do something here, so maybe you are not going to get the right thing. And so if I test this your code, I'll probably find a defect. So sometimes it's just having that rapport with the developer and also being active in even the planning phases. Some in the planning phases, what is being planned is not just um, the theoretical side of things. Sometimes things that are being planned are technical, the kind of language to use, the kind of flow, the kind of plugin, or the kind of different things. And as a tester, you can come and say, hey, this in my from my experience, maybe on working in one team before, if you've had that experience, or this plugin will with this language will always give you errors. There is no much support for it, blah blah. What you are doing at that point is you are preventing future defects, right? Or something is porous, you are saying, oh, this thing, as you do a research on, and this thing has been proven to be a porous this thing, so there may be a defect in future where there's a hack on it. I'm just giving you examples where your your involvement in during the agile process, and even testing right from the beginning, even from the UI, even from the requirement stage, you are testing, right? So you can be preventing defects from that point even before you get here. Sorry, I've used so much words. Mubarak, over to you. I hope you understood or you got my explanation, Peter.
Yeah, I got it to a point though.
Yeah, thank you very much, boss. So in addition to what he said, so there are scenarios. I don't know if you attended the last two sessions, Peter. So what I want you to put at the back of your yeah, sorry for the interruption, please. So we spoke about static testing, which is more like review, or let me say, is basically review. So you getting involved in the early stages of product development or your software development life cycle gives you an idea of what could happen, where could this happen. There are some bugs that they are not actually bugs; they are deviation from requirement. There are even bugs in the requirements. So you get to identify that at early stage. And one other method or approach we tend to use is we go with TDD, which is called test-driven development. So we'll get to see more about these things I mentioned in our upcoming sessions. There's a question dropped on the channel for you, boss. Is there such thing
Okay.
as bug-free software? Is it possible to reach absolute zero bug state for software? So we have to test
I
it.
I will not. I cannot say that. Even Facebook still have bugs till today. Uh,
Let me come in here. Yeah, I dropped the question. So, to Peter's question, let me answer it in another dimension or another way. So that brought me to these two questions. Is there such thing as a bug-free software? Is it possible to reach absolute zero bug states for your softwares? So my answer is no. Every application you see out there has one bug or the other. And this is what brings me to bug severity. So for every bug that we find or we see as a QA tester, there's a severity level tied to it. A bug can be critical. The severity can be critical, it can be high, it can be major, and the smallest is minor. Minor bugs are things like maybe text,
typographical errors.
typographical error, and the likes. So, but you as a tester, you need to be on top of the game in making sure that any application that is passing through you to to production must not have critical bugs. Then when it comes to high bugs, maybe at most one or two. Then you can have other bugs like major or minor. But you see that critical and high bug is not always advisable to go to production with such kind of bugs. Yeah, so most application out there has one bug or the other, but the question is, what's the bug severity? There are some bugs that are on application that you as a user you won't even know. Nobody knows that these are bugs, you know. Yeah. So over to you, Mubarak.
Yeah, thank you very much for the awesome explanation. You did that very beautifully. Thank you very much. Yeah, so do we still have anyone who intends to ask a question? Don't crack your brain too much if you don't have any question here. After your research, you are still readily available to you guys on the WhatsApp group. Please avoid DMs. Anything can happen. Okay. I'm assuming we don't have any question.
I don't know if I don't know if Mubarak have mentioned this to you guys before. There's nothing like stupid questions there. So no matter how stupid you may think that question is, please ask. The only time we have problems or we're concerned or worried is when testers don't ask questions. Or when we realize that you're asking your questions from A to Z, it gives us confidence that okay, well, this person knows his or her nails or what he or she is doing. So please always ask that question, no matter how stupid you may think they are. But trust me, your questions are not stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question. We have a question here which says, if a developer can test his code, what's the need for a software tester?
So yeah, developers. Let me just answer that. So usually developers are usually advised to do unit testing, as well as at least try and do some once you deploy, try and test some other part of the application, right? Now, testing is very broad. If the developer start testing the entire solution, he's no longer a developer, he's a tester because he will not have time to code anymore, right? So when you tell a developer to test his code, you tell it, you mean you should. So for example, if I'm in a project, I might just be writing maybe the code for registration, somebody else writing the code for login. It's my duty to test my units, my code, that my function that registers people, right? So, but once I register, I should also be able to try and see if I can log in, if the login is working. But I'm just going online to just, test it. I'm not coming to do any form of regression test. I'm not coming to check if login is still working with dashboard, or for example, there are so many there are deeper tests that, I'm sure Mubarak has taken you guys through so far. A developer is not going to go through all of that for testing or even start writing automated testing. What he's testing is that unit he has written. So if it's an API he has written, he's testing just his API usually, and maybe all the other dependencies with his API. He's not going so far. So the tester's job, you are testing as a user. The developer is testing as a function of code. So there are two different types of testing, sort of. The developer doesn't have the user in mind. All he knows is, I was told to do this, and I've written the code to do this. Is my code actually giving that exact output? And if he's giving the outputs, he's all good. Is the tester that will test, is he giving the output in record time? If there's, do you understand? So there are so many other things that testers will test for. Developer's testing is myopic, focus on a certain very small thing, whereas that of the tester is very wide and more from a user's perspective. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please. All right, great.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are 10 minutes over our time. So I would please advise us if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask on the WhatsApp group. We are always ready to answer your question. Thank you very much. To avoid taking a lot of our time at this point, we would be ending.
There's a question on the chat. There's a question on the chat.
Oh, thank you for that, Tunde. Okay. Okay, so the question says, after the product has been released to production and you ensure there is no bug, you have performed regression testing perform regression testing on production and they realize there's bug. As QA, what can you do to that? So basically, what this person is saying is, when you test, you've tested an application normally before, and when the application is deployed to production, then they come across a bug there. As QA, what is meant to be done? Do you mind if I take that pause?
Yes, fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, so a very simple answer is, in most cases, if care is not taken when deploying an application, there are usually issues because of version control system and configuration and all things like that. So as a quality assurance engineer, the first thing I would want to do when I come across this kind of situation is to understand the cause and why we have this particular issue. So that would help us mitigate against it another time, help us avoid that kind of situation another time. So on identifying the source or the cause, that's when. So by virtue of me identifying the source or cause, I will know probably if it is because I don't have enough or adequate test coverage. Probably there are some features I overlooked, or probably there are some things I didn't probably work on while testing. One, secondly, I get to understand what really happened. So probably something was not pushed on the testing server and it was pushed to production. So we get to understand it and we'll be able to mitigate against next time for it. And yes, just as we know, we ensure to get it fixed based on the priority and severity. So does that answer your question, Lukman? Thank you very much, guys. To avoid keeping us on the call for a very long time, yeah, please, while making your research, you come across anything you need clarifications on, always reach out to us. We don't mind whatever it takes. We don't even care what you guys need. We're always here for you. Thank you very much, guys. At this point, we can call it a day. Thank you very much, Sam. This is a
My
very good.
pleasure.
What did you say, please?
I said it was my pleasure.
Yeah, I feel like we should continue this till tomorrow, but everybody needs to rest.
Yeah. Someone is
Yeah,
raising his hand.
thank you very much. Lukman, go ahead, please.
No question.
Okay,
Sorry, no question.
yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. At this
All
point,
right, thank you.
we are going to be calling it a day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking time to attend. And I hope to
All
see
right.
you guys in the upcoming sessions as well. Take care. Bye.